Hi, Michelle Seitz here. You're watching Word 2011 for Mac. Macros. I will create a macro that will prevent text from separating at the end of a line. Here I have some text that I want to keep together, but there's a space between the letter R and the word part, and since part of the text was at the end of the line, it's separated. So I will create a macro that will put a non-breaking space between the letter R and the word part to keep the text together. So instead of using several keys, Option, Shift, Spacebar, and then the Delete key, you can perform the same functions with one click of the mouse. Here's a tip. Practice the steps you need before you create the macro, because the macro will record every step, good or bad, which could take the macro a few seconds longer to run. After you have the steps down pat, and before you record the macro, place your cursor at the correct location where you want to start the macro. In my particular case, I want my cursor after the letter R. Now, go to the Tools tab, select Macro, Record New Macro. You can also go to the Developer ribbon and select the Record icon. In the Macro Name field, give your macro a name. Make sure the macro contains no spaces. If you want to separate words, use the underscore character. In the Store Macro In field, there's a drop-down. You can elect to store the macro in just this document, or you can store it in all documents. Since I want it available on my toolbar, every time I open Word, I will select all documents. If your macro is challenging, there's also a description field where you can document the steps it took to create the macro. Since my macro is pretty self-explanatory, I will leave this field blank and click OK. Now I'll record the steps of my macro. For the non-breaking space, I need to hit and hold the Option key and the Shift key, and then hit the space bar. Now I will delete the space before the word part. And when I do that, the macro steps are done. Now go to the Tools tab, select Macro Stop Recording, or on the Developer tab, click the icon Stop. Now I want to go back in and view my macro. Either go to the Tools tab, Macro, and then Macro again, or on the Developer ribbon, select Macros. Now I can see that my macro has been created. Now I will show you how to add the macro to one of your toolbars. Right-click on a toolbar, either the Standard or Formatting toolbar, and select Customize Toolbars and Menus. With the Commands tab selected, in the Categories field, scroll down until you see the word Macros. Now, in the Commands field, I'll scroll down until I find the macro that I just created. I'll click on it and drag it to the toolbar. Your macro is now on the toolbar. Click OK. To change the name of the macro, hover over the icon, right-click, and select Properties. In the Name field, you can see that Word automatically adds the words Normal and New Macros. You can edit these words out, and you can also add spaces here instead of underscore character or no space. Then click OK. Now when you hover your mouse over the icon, it will display the entire macro name. Now you want to test your macro. Put your cursor where you want the non-breaking space and click the macro. And voila, the non-breaking space has been added to my text. And that is the end of this lesson, macros.